It's over to you, Rabbi Wilkinson. There we go.
Okay, good morning and thank you. And thank you, Rabbi Wilkinson, for arranging these sessions, as I always say, and indeed for inviting me. And I apologize, I am on fairly strong painkillers, so if I do fall asleep, it's nothing to do with you. It's only the painkillers. It's a long double parsha, as we know, and there's an awful lot to talk about that's so relevant to our times at the moment. I don't want to focus on the hatred of Balak and Bilam, although terrible news that came out of Montreal last night, that people don't know about the news in Montreal. What do you do know about it? For people looking to, okay, not everyone. Okay, there was an attack on a kosher supermarket in Montreal, and unfortunately, two people, I understand, lost their lives. A Jewish person lost their lives, a shopper and a policeman. But I also don't want to focus on the immorality at the end of the parsha, although there's so much to talk about there. But I want to focus on a small news item that appeared yesterday that struck me and I thought was slightly relevant to the parsha. You may have noticed, if you read any newspapers or if you saw anything online, that Sir Keir Starmer is stepping down as Prime Minister. And it seems as though Andy Burnham is going to be the next Prime Minister. Now,
there's talk of a competition.
People have said they're going to. We're being too. So we've seen what's happening. Now, I studied politics and I studied history at A level, and for that reason, I actually have to remember to apologise for my lack of sartorial elegance. I was always taught that you have to appear, if you're giving a shiur, you have to wear a collar, tie, a jacket, and I apologise for not wearing my tie, but I thought with the heat I could excuse myself, and again, I want to apologise for that. And certainly when I was taking A-levels at school, we were allowed to loosen our top buttons, but not remove our jackets or ties, but that was the school rule. What can we do? Ridiculous one, but still. But there may be an A-level essay question a few years down the line of saying, why did Keir Starmer resign in 2026 after 2 years in power? Because anyone looking at it would try and work out and be puzzled, like, what has the man done wrong? We've got hostile media, we've got everything else. But technically, he's not been involved in too many scandals. He's stood for the rule of law. He's tried to be a decent man, maybe a little bit boring, maybe a little bit ineffectual. But why has he stood down and what do we do with this? And maybe part of it is the lack of vision, the lack of presentation of what he's trying to get across. But really is he's lacking charisma, and that is where he was. Some people have said that he has achieved, and I'm not going to comment politically about whether he's right or wrong, but they've said that Starmer's actually laid down a basis for an improvement of the country, and they're saying that the next leader will be able to literally nick through and tap in and claim for himself what could be claimed for Starmer and Starmer's winners. And then I was thinking about, what about Moshe and Yehoshua? Moshe did all the hard work. He did all the heavy lifting of getting the people together in the wilderness. And then what did Yehoshua do? He managed to get there to bring them to the promised land. And arguably, I'm not going to go through that, so you can think about it, that maybe Yehoshua had the easy task of just getting the people who've been trained and manipulated into the right way, into the right frame of mind to understand what they had to be as a Jewish people. And he managed to then take and get the success of going through to the land of Israel. But I think Parshat Lukat itself provides us with some important lessons about leadership. And that's really what I want to talk about, and really look at one of the central narratives of the Parsha, and the whole idea of the Mei Merivah, the waters of Merivah, what happened there and what we can learn from there about leadership generally. Now, that story, if you remember, it takes, in effect, 3 parts. In the first part, Miriam, Moshe's sister, dies, and the people complain that there's no water. That's the first part. In the second part, Hashem gives Moshe and Aaron instructions about how to get water supplies to the community. What he told, take the staff, assemble the kahal, the people, the Ada. It refers to assemble the Ada. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will give forth water. And you bring forth them from the rock, giving the community, the Ada, and their animals to drink. And what happened, as we know, Moshe took his staff from Hashem as was commanded. Moshe and Aaron gathered, Vayikilu, the assembly, the Kahal, together before the rock. And he said, as we know, Shimon, listen now, you rebels, should we produce water for you from this rock? And he raised his hand, struck the rock twice, water gushed out. Happy ending. Well, not quite. In part 3, what happens? Hashem tells Moshe that they're not going to reach Eretz Israel. They're not going to reach the promised land. Why? Well, again, what happens? Because you did not put your trust in me, Hashem, to demonstrate my holiness in the Israelites' eyes, nor shall you bring this assembly, Kahal, into the land that I'm giving to them. What did Moshe do wrong? Now, there are loads and loads of commentaries and suggestions. Maybe he lost his temper. Maybe he called the congregation rebels. Maybe he hit the rock twice. Maybe he hit it rather than spoke to it. In that, maybe he diluted Hashem's power by using the word we for producing water. Rav Shlomo Riskin, he should be well, brings a wonderful explanation looking at this, based on the difference between two words that appear several times during the Parsha, Eda and Kahal. Kahal, he says, consists of many individuals who gather together. The Kehillah, the disparate people who constitute a crowd. By contrast, an Eda is guided by specific unifying purposes. Think of a Kehillah and Eda Haredet we have in Israel. We have a unifying purpose. Individuals for an Eda form a community united by a commitment to generational continuity. At its root, writes Rabbi Riskin, an Eda is what he calls a witness community. Now, according to Rabbi Riskin's interpretation, Hashem wants Moshe to see the Bnei Israel through the prism of a community that bears witness to Hashem's presence. But Moshe, who, remember, he was still in Avelat, he was still mourning the loss of his sister. He was fed up, no doubt, with the constant complaints spanning close to 40 years. He's no longer capable of that. Hashem's conclusion, therefore, was that Moshe can't continue to lead them. He can't lead the Jewish people into the promised land. Now, despite being described in Bamidbar as a very humble man, more so than any other man, it's curious. And one thing that really strikes me as you go through this and you go through Devarim as well, Moshe doesn't apologize. He never says sorry. He asks to be allowed into the land. But as far as we can see in the Torah, he never expresses remorse for the actions at Mei Merivah, the waters of Merivah. Now, is it possible that Moshe thought he did nothing wrong? Is it possible there was, in fact, nothing wrong with what he did? But then why wasn't he allowed to enter into the land? Maybe, and it's just a thought, maybe it was that a change was needed. After the men of the Yetziat Mitzrayim, all the men of the generation of Yetziat Mitzrayim had died, a generational change at the top was also needed. Hashem's decision to prevent Moshe and Aaron from entering the land may reflect the fact that they were no longer suitable to lead the community into this new reality. Later, as he prays to Hashem for guidance on how to appoint a successor, we get a glimpse of what Moshe thinks about the required characteristics of leadership are. We find out later on in Bamidbar, he says, let Hashem, God of spirit of all flesh, appoint a man of the community who will go out before them and come in before them, who will lead them out and bring them home. Let not the Lord's community be like sheep without a shepherd. Rashi explains this whole idea. He said, why did Moshe use this? Why did he use the phrase, the spirit of all flesh? It's because he wanted a leader who understands each and every person's mind, each and every person's unique mind. But the rest of Moshe's prayer also tells us something. It tells us something about a leader's role. And I think the tension between meeting the people where they are and pushing them to where they need to be. Of Jonathan Sachs, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, writes of how the phrase, we will go out before them and come in before them, means that a leader must lead from the front. They can't be like the apocryphal British politician who said, of course I follow the party. After all, I'm the leader. For Rabbi Sachs, the phrase, who will lead them out and bring them home, means a leader must lead from the front. Must not be so far out front that when they turn around, there's no one behind them. But they've got to lead from the front and guide people on where they are going. And I think that's an important idea that we need to also think about. A leader has to go at the people's pace, not too fast. And maybe that's something Moshe did wrong as well with the Meraglim, the sin of Meraglim, that he thought they were ready to go into the land, but they weren't there. They weren't yet ready. But a leader has to educate them, has to prepare them for the challenges ahead, has to listen to their grievances, give them courage, but lift their sights, give them a vision as to where they need to go, where they need to be. Slow down if they're not able to go fast, but then push them forward when they've got that ability. A leader's got to be impatient and patient, both at once, and it's a hard task. It's a difficult balancing act, but there's no choice for a leader. A leader mustn't go so fast and so far ahead that they're at us. Like, maybe in a way, this is something the new leader of the country has to think about. His leadership is like walking a tightrope. And what does Moshe do? He prays for that balance. I read once of a politician who wrote a very interesting thing. He said, a leader should lead rather than be led. But there's a difference between a politician who thinks about the next election cycle and a leader who thinks about future generations. I don't want to be right, but irrelevant. The wisdom in leadership is not to stay in the middle and let people pass you. But also, you can't be so far out in front that people don't even see your back. The latter role is the intellectual who believes that in 50 years people will understand him and think that he's right. A leader has to maintain connection with the people. Rabbi Sachs and various other people refer to a book on leadership by the Harvard lecturer, Ronald Heifetz. And his book's called Leadership on the Line. And he says that leadership requires that people be shaken out of their comfort zone in order to facilitate change, but at a rate they can absorb. And Heifetz describes leadership as a razor's edge, delicate balance between causing people to feel the need for change on the one hand, and preventing them from feeling overwhelmed on the other. Moshe lived for years on that razor's edge. And that's the core of Moshe's prayer to Hashem. Perhaps deep down, especially after Mei Merivah, the waters of Merivah, Moshe realized that he could no longer strike that balance. He realized it was time for someone new to guide the Eidah into the promised land. And maybe that's the realization that Keir Starmer reached over the weekend. It's not his role to go forward. It's up to someone else. But in all of our roles, we need to look at our leaders. We need to think about what our leaders need to do. We need to make sure that they're people of vision, people of inspiration, but people are in touch with us as well. It goes for our country. It goes for our nation. It goes for our schools and our communities. But we need to be in touch, but we need to inspire and hopefully lead people to go on forward, to stretch, to achieve everything that we can do. I wish you all a good week.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I will. I'll say goodbye to those on Zoom and see you all next week. Have a cool week.